on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So the news out of Israel is the Israelis have carried out, or in the process of carrying out, a target operation inside Gaza's largest hospital. This is El Shifa. And it seems fairly clear, not just with respect to current intelligence, but with respect to years of intelligence, that Hamas used the hotel as a base camp. In fact, as the Wall Street Journal editorial board opines, Hamas has used the hospital at least since 2006, when a PBS documentary showed terrorists roaming its halls and cordoning off wings. Even Human Rights Watch admitted in 2007 that Hamas had fired at Fatah, its Palestinian rival, from within the hospital. In the 2008-2009 war, Hamas leaders hid in a bunker under the hospital. Mm-hmm. The New York Times wrote that Hamas openly operated in the halls. In the 2014 war, the Washington Post reported that Shifa was a Hamas de facto headquarters. Quote, Amnesty International found that Hamas tortured prisoners on hospital grounds. So it shouldn't surprise anyone when yesterday NSC spokeshuman John Kirby said
finally admitted the truth.
Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad members operate a command and control node from El Shifa in Gaza City. So when President Biden was asked about it, how could he say what he said?
Well, I have not been reluctant in expressing my concern as going on. And it's my hope and expectation that there will be less intrusive action relative to the hospital. The hospital must be protected.
What does that mean? Against the weight of all of this evidence over many, many moons, including the current one. It's baffling. I mean, I understand that the Israelis need to sort of keep up appearances and appreciate what America is providing and at least some of what the president has said. But I mean, good grief. How much confidence does that inspire?
0 to none. And think just right after the attack, he worked 2 half days. President Biden did.
Yinam Cohen is the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest. Consul General Cohen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So I understand we have to be diplomatic, but I mean, can you understand my confusion over what we know versus what the president said?
As you mentioned, we have for years information about the fact that Hamas uses not only the Shifa hospital, by the way, but also other hospitals in the Gaza Strip as a hideout for their military operation. They have constructed a very extensive network of tunnels underneath these hospitals to conceal their top leadership, their headquarters, ammunition, and according to the information that we have now, and that was also shared yesterday by the White House and the Pentagon, they're probably also hiding some of the hostages in the tunnels underneath this hospital. This is why the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, went out yesterday for, a very targeted operation in a very precise section of the hospital, following intelligence that we had, with the hope to not only dismantle and eliminate Hamas leadership and operatives, but also to be able to find some clues regarding the hostages. Let me remind you that just a few days ago, in another hospital, the Rantisi Children's Hospital in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, our forces found underground tunnels with a lot of evidence that some of the hostages had been held there before our troops arrived. They didn't find, unfortunately, they weren't able to rescue hostages because they weren't there. But we had a lot of information, a lot of proof that the hostages were held there. There were bottles of babies, women clothes, and so on. So it is a clear evidence that hostages were held by Hamas underneath hospitals. And this is exactly what we're trying to find out right now.
Well, what about, they keep showing pictures of the premature babies that are in that hospital. And, but the Israeli government, they have portable incubators that they're ready to take those babies in to get them out of there. But Hamas is not letting them out. Is that correct?
It is true. Our operation is, of course, against the Hamas operatives and leadership, and not against, the people that are hospitalized in this hospital. As you said, Israel brought not only incubators into the Gaza Strip, but also medical experts who speak Arabic, by the way, so that they could support the people that really need help in the hospitals while our soldiers are fighting Hamas leadership. And as you said, in many cases, Hamas is not protecting the Palestinian people. Hamas is interested in killing Jews, in killing Israelis. So they not only not letting people out, they're also shooting, and we have infinite indications for that. They're shooting at people who are trying to use the humanitarian corridors that Israel created and to evacuate from the war zone.
So how did this incursion yesterday go? I mean, what can you tell us about what occurred, consistent with what the objective was?
As you mentioned before, it is still ongoing, so I don't have full information. But what I can confirm at this moment is that both Hamas ammunition was found. Hamas operatives that tried to, shoot at our soldiers were eliminated. We're talking about, operatives that were inside the hospital, of course. And unfortunately, up until now, no hostages were found, but our forces are continuing the operation. And I want to remind you, we're not talking about, just a small tunnel. We're talking about an extensive network of up to 500 kilometers underground tunnels. This is where the money of the international humanitarian aid throughout the years went for. It didn't go to the benefit of the Palestinians in Gaza. It went for the construction of the probably most extensive underground construction in the world. And this is what we're trying to fight right now.
Is there any early indication about patients from the hospital that were essentially rescued by the Israelis and are being cared for? You mentioned the medical professionals that are embedded, I suppose, or any other information that has been gleaned that would aid in identifying where hostages are?
There's regarding the patients, yes, and moreover, I would say Israel is ready also to take to our territory in some cases, people that are hospitalized there in severe conditions, just to make sure that they get the treatment that they need. Regarding the hostages, let me just quote the spokesperson of the Israeli Defense Forces. As time goes by, we have more and more intelligence about some of the hostages and some of the conditions that they're in. Of course, I don't have this information. It is better. It should remain a secret. But I hope that both through intelligence and the military operations, we'll be able to rescue some of the hostages.
What did you take of the March for Israel yesterday in D.C.? I mean, you had tens of thousands. They were saying 300,000 people. You had Hollywood stars. You had politicians, both on the left and the right, at the event. Did that give you any hope?
It gives me a lot of hope because I think this march yesterday, as you said, 300,000 people, one of the biggest in DC's history, definitely the biggest for support for Israel in many, many decades, which brought together, people from the East Coast, West Coast, Chicago, the Midwest, the South. It was pretty amazing, and I think that this march really reflects the true American spirit. Because, as you said, you had the Speaker of the House, but also the minority leader, the majority leader of the Senate, Hollywood stars, Muslims for peace in the Middle East, a lot of Jewish and non-Jewish friends of Israel. This is a true spirit. And, people sometimes get confused because they see, I would say, fringe fringe groups that march with a lot of hate Also here in the streets of Chicago, they do not represent the true American spirit. We see all the polls. I mean, more than 80% of the Americans stand with Israel. And I think that the march yesterday really represents this vast majority of Americans who support Israel, who understand that we share the same values, and who chose to stand in the right side of history.
I know there's some tiptoeing around politicians that needs to be done, but maybe not New York Times columnists. I want you to react to what Jonathan Capehart, who's a columnist for the New York Times and a commentator on PBS and MSNBC, what he had to say about Israel's right to defend itself.
No reoccupation of Gaza, no reduction in the territory of Gaza, no forcible displacement of Palestinians, and Gaza should never be allowed to be used as a base for terrorist attacks against Israel or anyone else. Those are the simple principles that we are standing behind as we look to the future, and we will work with all of our partners, with the Israelis, with countries in the Arab world, and especially with the Palestinians, so that they can have a voice in what the future governance of both the West Bank and Gaza look like.
That's not it. But what he said was that Israel must, and I'm quoting him, must defend itself, but do so in a manner becoming of a democracy. That phrase, in a manner becoming of democracy, necessarily insinuates that there's either some evidence that Israel is not, he believes, or that he's worried that Israel won't. How do you react to that?
Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Israel operates in a very complicated situation against the terrorist organizations that hide behind civilians, as we said, including in hospitals, but not only in hospitals, also in schools and other civilian infrastructure. I'm really open to criticism. It is important. It's part of our democratic fabric. I would only say that he's probably not the first commentator on MSNBC that criticizes Israel. I prefer to get some criticism at MSNBC and defend our people rather than have 1,400 Israelis killed and get praised by MSNBC.
Yeah, that seems to be a sensible position. Yinam Cohen is the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest. Consul General Cohen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
You've heard me talk about my love of coffee over and over again. I'm here to tell you I have discovered one of the best brews I've ever tasted and a company that I cannot wait to support. I'm here to tell you about Bone Frog Coffee. The Bone Frog is a sacred symbol in the SEAL teams. It honors those that gave the ultimate sacrifice, their lives. Bone Frog was founded by Tim Crook Shank, a former Navy SEAL and 25-year Navy veteran. Bone Frog honors the fallen, those who gave everything for our freedoms and our American way of life, by giving 10% of all the proceeds to benefit many of the U.S. Navy SEAL foundations.